All right, and joining us now is one of the world's leading observers of the African cheetah, naturalist and conservationist, Valmik Thapar. He's also coming out with a book on the cheetah. Valmik Thapar, thank you so much for your time. You've been observing cheetah behavior for years and you've been studying them for years. Mr. Thapar, there's been enough debated over whether this is an ambitious project, a harebrained scheme or not. I don't want to talk about that, whether it's a sound scheme or not. The cheetahs are here. We have called you in, asked you on NDTV to try and understand what is needed in order to make sure that these beautiful creatures survive and thrive in this transcontinental location. So the question now is, what is needed to make sure that the species can adapt, can rewild, breed and thrive and actually become part of this new landscape into which they have been introduced? So Mr. Thapar, my first question to you, this area was originally meant to be a lion habitat, was it not? We wanted to relocate the lions from Gir here. Now it is a cheetah habitat. Are the two interchangeable in terms of terrain, weather, prey availability, predator exposure?
Let me start by saying that the cheetah as a big cat is very close to my heart. It is a magnificent cat. It is beautiful, elegant, but highly fragile, highly delicate, and needs great amounts of space to live freely and escape all its threats. Now, coming to Kuno Palpur, it was to be the second home of the Asiatic lion. And the reason was that we needed a second population to prevent a disease from wiping the first population in Gir National Park in Gujarat. But the Gujarat government did not allow any lion to leave the state of Gujarat. So over the years and the changes of governments, with the wisdom of various people who've promoted the African cheetah coming to India, it's got to be now a habitat for African cheetahs. I don't believe this is the way to do things, because if you brought lions there, hyenas and leopards would keep away from the lions. If you bring cheetahs there, hyenas and leopards are the key enemies of cheetahs. If you visit Africa, single-spotted hyenas will chase away cheetahs, will bite cheetahs and kill cheetahs. I'm not even talking about a pack here. I'm talking about single animals. Lions will take away the food of cheetahs whenever they get an opportunity and kill cheetahs. And I've watched this with my own eyes. Leopards are the biggest threat to cheetahs. So Kuno Palpur is an area of leopards. So my issue here is that when you develop Kuno Palpur, when you bring 6,400 square kilometers to its ideal shape, your population of leopards and hyenas and even wolves will go up. And these are all enemies of your 5 to 10 to 15 cheetahs which you're introducing in the first years, which may go up to 35. So it's a huge problem for any forest officer, expert or conservationist to find a path in a minefield of obstacles.
So it's an uphill task, you're running against the wind. But Mr. Thapar, you mentioned leopards and hyenas as the greatest enemies, or let's say predators for the cheetah. But when this lion relocation was nixed, the reason given was also, one of the reasons given was the presence of tigers. That was cited as the reason for, the failure to make the switch. Is that no longer a concern apart from leopards and hyenas?
The tiger is a concern, but it's an occasional concern. Tigers from Ranthambore once a year will come through a corridor to Kuno Palpur and they will spend time there. So if you're asking me to give you a kind of safeguard for Kuno Palpur, I would stop and close that corridor, never allow a tiger into Kuno Palpur. I would convert a lot of the woodland in Kuno Palpur into grassland, which is not allowed by the law. I would reduce the population of leopards and hyenas by relocating them, but that's not allowed by the law. I would have to resettle 160 villages in a 6,200 square kilometer landscape and get rid of all the village dogs and packs, because village dogs will tear apart the cheetah. And that will not be acceptable to animal activists. And the wolves. Within 100 kilometers of Kuno Palpur, we have 150 wolves in Kela Devi, part of Ranthambore Tiger Reserve. So it's a big problem. And we've got to find a way around it to keep these cheetahs survive.
So a high price to pay, because you have to evaluate whether it's cheetahs on one hand versus all of these other species on the other hand that are, natural to India. But, you mentioned in your first answer the space that the cheetahs need. Mr. Thapar, when we grew up, when you think of cheetahs, you think of them dashing across this gorgeous terrain. When we grew up learning that they're the fastest animal on the planet, one thinks they need open space, obviously, some shrub, some cover as they approach their prey, take them by surprise, because we know, general knowledge taught us as we were growing up, that they're sprinters, their bodies do overheat. Do we have that kind of terrain, sir, in Kuno? Because the reserves that I've seen, and I haven't seen that many in India, are very thickly forested.
When I watch them in the Serengeti, there is unlimited space. You can run 20 kilometers and it's the space that keeps the cheetah safe from lions, from hyenas, from leopards, because it can run away and no animal can chase it or get hold of it. Now in Kuno Palpur, I said earlier that unless you convert some of the woodland into grassland and create those spaces, it's a problem, because the cheetah is facing obstacle courses with bushes, trees. He has to turn around corners, stony ground, not soft ground. All these issues will come to the fore in 3 months. At the moment, the cheetahs are in small enclosures. These are quarantine enclosures. Then they'll be shifted to another enclosure, which is a 10 square kilometer enclosure. And finally, they will be released. But when they're finally released, don't forget, the cheetahs walk a lot. Cheetahs have been known to walk 150 kilometers in a few days. Cheetahs can have an area of 2,000 square kilometers in the Serengeti. They've been found from one end of the Serengeti to another. So you have to watch these animals. And can you imagine the teams that are going to be involved 24/7 to go after and follow these cheetahs to make sure that they are living, that they are fully safeguarded, that nothing happens to them? I think it's a huge, huge challenge, a huge task. And I'm not sure why we are undertaking it at this level, because we have a lot of problems with our indigenous species. It will be at the cost of some of our indigenous species. And we need to find a balance with what we are doing and what we have.
Mr. Thapar, I have to admit, I was distracted by this beautiful footage that you have shot and when you've been at the Serengeti. And there was this stunning footage of these two leopards, I think. Almost they looked like they were playfully catching this deer, which leads me to ask you, this tiny deer like an antelope.
There were two cheetahs who were sub-adults who were patting a Thompson's gazelle, and that's how they learned to hunt. The mother disables
it looked
the
like this beautiful dance. They're such delicate and, so light on their feet. But that leads me to ask you, Mr. Thapar, what do African cheetahs eat normally, and what will they be eating, or what are they preying on here in Madhya Pradesh? Who are the prey here in Kuno for the cheetah?
Well, in the Serengeti, where there are about 300 wild cheetahs, there are about 1 million plus prey species. So hundreds of thousands of Thompson gazelles, Grant gazelles, lots of smaller antelopes become their menu. They also eat on African scrub hares and smaller animals that roam around. In Kuno Palpur, unless we rehabilitate black buck herds or bring in 50,000 chinkaras or Indian gazelles to become a part of their diet, they're going to be forced to try and hunt spotted deer and sambar deer, which are forest animals and are not animals that will herd up in groups of 500 where the cheetah can sprint at 100 kilometers to bring one down. It's going to be a tough one to learn and watch from. And I think it's a huge headache for those who are going to monitor the freedom of these cheetahs in 3 months.
So wouldn't wild instinct, or just hunger, survival, not just trigger this hunting? Yes, I know you're saying it's all new, and probably we're asking, should we have made it easier for them to adjust? But how different is a spotted deer, or how similar is it to a small antelope? How much of an adjustment will it be for these cheetahs to switch over to this, sorry, for lack of a better word, new diet?
I think it'll be a big adjustment, because the spotted deer can disappear in thick forest. And the male spotted deer has large antlers, and he can turn them round and he can injure a cheetah. Remember, cheetahs suffer from injuries, and when they have injuries, they are normally fatal because they are very delicate. Their legs are really important to their speed, and they cannot afford any injury in their natural run of life within the habitat they occupy. So it's really important to manage their food in terms of the fact that our smaller antelope require breeding farms. We need to set up breeding farms for chinkara and black buck. We haven't done that. We don't allow private entrepreneurs to do that. Yet we want to bring in and make history by bringing cheetahs. Let's open the whole thing out then. Let's create grassland. Let the government come out and say we are converting woodland to grassland and we are going to create these huge areas for cheetahs. That is our priority number one. But can they do this according to the law?
Well, let history not judge us harshly. But talking about how vulnerable they are, the other basic fact that comes up if you just do a basic search, basic general knowledge as we did growing up, was that cheetahs don't do very well under stress. There are species that is supposedly, correct me if I'm wrong, breeds poorly in captivity in the wild. They are a highly endangered species, and their numbers have been coming down.
Declining. Their numbers are declining at 1 to 2% a year. Their population is 6,500 to 7,100. They've done very badly in terms of breeding till 1955. In fact, there were no cases except one in Akbar's reign in the 16th century. So it was after that that there were successes in breeding in South Africa and Namibia. But it is a very bad breeder. There's a 95% mortality of cubs in the Serengeti. That means only 5% of the cubs born survive till adulthood. These are the problems of the cheetah, and these problems it faces because it's susceptible to disease. Its genetic structure is very similar to each other. It's quite identical because there was problems 10,000 years ago when there was a wall with the genes and they were going extinct. So they are very fragile, they're very delicate, they catch infections, and we have to be 100% more careful than any other big cat.
So you're basically saying they're susceptible to disease, new environments, their population drops, and they have genetic problems overall. But at the same time, you said that they have been bred in South Africa, for example. Yes, they've never been translocated over continents, but they have been translocated to other countries in Africa. So why would India be any different?
India is different because it doesn't have the open plains. We are translocating the cheetah into what is mainly forest with small patches of grassland. And we have prey species that are normally prey species for leopard and tiger. And we have to see how in this minefield a cheetah is going to walk, hunt, feed and bring up its cubs. It's a whole different ballgame than translocating to the Mozambique or translocating to private safari parks in South Africa, because those parks in South Africa are fenced in like Pinda. I've visited Pinda. I've watched and seen how a pineapple farm has become an area. I know how many cheetahs are taken out of Pinda and brought back to Pinda. And there's a lot of man manipulation that takes place in South Africa. This doesn't happen here. We need to set a whole new infrastructure to do this in India.
So in South Africa, these are, farms, they're closed off, they enclose these large spaces, but in India, they're actually going to be out in the open eventually.
Yes, Kuno Palpur is surrounded by 150 villages. It's got thousands of people around. It's got thousands of feral livestock. It's got village dogs. It's got everything that makes up life in India, which are human beings, forests, all mixed together. Now, we don't have village resettlement programs that have been so successful that we can think that we are going to move out all these villages. The minute you do that, you may allow more and more tigers to come in from Ranthambore. Or one of the cheetahs might hop over to Ranthambore in 2-3 days. God knows what will happen. But you'll have teams following their radio collars, satellite collars, and seeing what happens and when you should tranquilize one that goes too far. And I don't believe in too much tranquilization of big cats. If you tranquilize a big cat too many times, it suffers, it gets traumatized. So there are lots of problems. All these problems will have to be dealt with by the managers and experts who've promoted this idea.
So basically, when you are creating hospitable conditions for the cheetah, the African cheetah to thrive, you are automatically creating conditions for the tiger, for the leopard, and for the hyena to thrive if you're clearing it out of human habitat, etc. So that's a big challenge. But I want to ask you, Mr. Thapar, when we look at old black and white pictures, we see so many come up of people with cheetahs as pets. You have
It
that
was a
famous...
pet. It was a pet for the rich and powerful all over the world. In
Well,
Europe,
what does that mean?
in
What does that
England,
tell us about the cheetah?
everywhere. Like, the cheetah is so gentle. It loves human beings. If I'm watching cheetahs in Africa, it jumps into the passenger seat with me. It looks at me, then jumps onto
We
the
have
bonnet.
that picture. Let's pull that up of what Mr. Thapar is talking about. Go ahead, sir.
And then it jumps onto the bonnet and uses it as a vantage point to look for its prey and its food. It has never killed a human being. So it was a royal pet. All the rich had it. It was used for hunting. Our princes, especially in Gujarat, have imported hundreds from Africa last year. So this was an animal that was a companion of man for thousands of years. So I don't know about wild populations in India. I know that a lot were imported from Persia and Africa and came as gifts to the emperors in their courts. And this connection with human beings makes it an amazingly gentle animal. I will never forget the moments I spent eye to eye watching a cheetah because it takes your breath away.
Well, we will end on that note and that image of you looking into the eyes of the cheetah. These are magnificent creatures, and we hope we can give them a home, and we hope, all of us do hope, that they can survive here.
My fingers are crossed.
Thank you for coming on tonight and pointing out the challenges so that we can go into this huge, very ambitious project, as informed as we possibly can. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.